Hey guys, this is Mr. Grice for Algebra 1, Chapter 11.4, Notes, Day 1. Today we're talking about solving radical equations. Our learning target today is to be able to solve equations involving radicals and check for extraneous solutions. Let's go ahead and get started. So you must check every single solution by using substitution. Okay, today we're going to be talking about solving radical equations. Okay, so at the very end we will be checking every single thing. Okay, so when we're talking about radical expressions, let's look at a problem like the square root of x plus 2 equaling x. We're going to learn how to solve something like this today. Okay, and let's say that x equals -1. We would need to check to see if that makes a true statement. Okay, so -1 plus 2 is the square root of 1, and does that equal -1? No, it doesn't. So that would be an extraneous solution. It doesn't happen, okay? And when we're talking about substitution, we need to substitute it back into the original problem, okay? So if you check a solution and it results in a false statement. Okay, let's actually make that look like the word results. Okay, so if it turns into a false statement or it results in square rooting a negative, then the solution is called an extraneous, let's make sure I spell this right, solution. Okay, and then if none of these solutions, then the equation has no real solution, or NRS. Okay, so today we are only worrying about this side right here. Okay, we're only going to do the left column, and day by day we'll start doing more. So these problems are solved by using inverses. Okay, and we've talked about using inverses before because that is SADMAP. Okay, and to get rid of an exponent, that's when we use roots. All right, so let's talk about a little reminder right here. So this is our reminder. Okay, when we are solving linear equations, we use SADMAP. Okay, and we know that to get rid of addition, you would use subtraction. Or if you had subtraction, you'd use addition. Okay? If you had multiplication, you would use division. If you had division, you would use multiplication. And now if you have a square, you would use a square root. But if you had a square root, you would use a square. Okay? So that's how the inverse operations goes. Okay? And now, but if you had a solving quadratic equations, all right, we can use inverses and SADMAP. There's factoring And there's also the quadratic formula. Now in class, Ms. Carranza said that all of our problems, we are going to be able to solve that by factoring, and that's going to be the main one that we talk about. But just remember that a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c when it equals 0. Okay? Alright, let's get back to number 1. So I'm just going to be zoomed in over here because this is all we have to worry about. Now, they're solved by using inverses. And we talked about the inverse of a square is a square root. But if we have a square root, we would square it. Okay? And by squaring it, we cancel that. And we're left with 2x minus 3 equals x plus 6. Okay? Now, is this linear or is this quadratic? Well, it's linear because the highest exponent on both of these is 1. Okay? So we're going to use inverses. I need to get my x to one side, so I'm moving the smaller x. And we get x minus 3 equals 6. Alright, now the next thing we have to do is we have to add 3 to both sides, and we get x equals 9. Now, I can't circle that yet because I don't know if that's a solution or not. I have to check it. And this is where we use the original equation, the square root of 2x minus 3 and the square root of x plus, not 9, x plus 6, okay? So, minus 3, wherever there's an x, I'm going to put parentheses, and we're checking to see if 9 works. Now, most of you guys can do this in your head, but all I want you to focus on is what's underneath. Okay? 2 times 9 is 18. 18 minus 3 is 15. Well, 9 plus 6, well, that's easy. 15. Okay? Since this is a true statement, we can come back here and say that x equals 9 is our answer. Okay? Just remember that we have to check first. All right. Let's move on to number 2. So, we have to get rid of the roots on both sides. So what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And then we're left with 8x minus 14 equals 10x minus 8. Excuse me. So I'm going to move the smaller variable so I don't have to work with negatives. And we get 2x minus 8. I want to add the 8 to both sides. And we get negative 6 equals 2x. And the last thing is to divide both sides by 2. And we get negative 3 equals x. Now, the next thing we have to do is to check. Alright, so we have 8 parentheses minus 14 and the 10 negative 3 minus 8. And we're plugging in a negative 3. I'm going to make that look all nice and pretty and blue. So underneath the square root, 8 times negative 3 is negative 24, and then negative 24 minus 14. So Remember, all we're doing is focusing on what is underneath the square root. Negative 38. So only what is underneath. Oops. Okay. Now, is that a true statement? Yes. Okay. This is a true statement. However, we can't have a negative underneath there. Okay. So this answer is not true. We would go with NRS. Okay? And that's because we can't have negatives underneath. Alright, let's flip it over. So just remember, equations with two variables, all variables are inside their own radical. Alright, we're doing the same thing. Okay, they're solved by inverses. Sad map. So to get rid of it, we square it, and we're left with negative 6x plus 25 equals x plus 11. Okay, I only like working with positive variables, so I'm going to add the 6x to the other side. And we get 25 equals 7x plus 11. I cancel the addition with subtraction, and we get 14 equals 7x. And then we divide by 7, and we get 2 equals x. Okay? I can't jump and say that that's the answer. All right? We have to check it. So that's negative 6 plus 25, and does that equal plus 11? And we are plugging in a 2. All right, so I want you guys pause the video, see if you can do the check all by yourself. Good luck. Okay, and for both of those, you should have gotten the square root of 13, which means that 2x is your answer, or x equals 2 is your answer. Okay? All right, so last problem for today. We are going to square root both sides, or square both sides, and we're left with x squared minus 5x equals x plus 7. And now what type of problem do we have? Well, this is a quadratic. Okay, and when we're dealing with a quadratic, we want it set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the x over here and the 7. So both of those guys cancel out, and we get x squared minus 6x minus 7 equals 0. So off to the side, we need numbers that add up to get to negative 6 and multiply to get to negative 7. Well, there's only one set of numbers that multiply to 7, and that's 1 and 7, but one of them needs to be negative, and it's going to be negative 7. So we're going to split this to x squared plus 1x minus 7x minus 7. Okay, all of that still equals 0. You can factor out an x, and since our leading coefficient is negative, we can factor out a negative 7. So when we factor that out, we're left with x plus 1. Factor out the negative 7, you're left with x plus 1, which is good. because those guys match up. And so what we factored with is x minus 7, x plus 1 equals 0. Remember, last chapter we talked about setting each one of these equal to 0, and we get x equals 7 and x equals negative 1. Okay? So, now that we have two answers, we have to do two checks. We have to do the x equals 7 check, and then we have to do a x equals negative 1 check. So, we've got squared minus 5. Make sure all of it stays in parentheses. Okay? And we're going to use that same, it's not going to let me do that, so I'm just going to have to rewrite it. Life is tough in technology world today. So, remember that we got 7 and negative 1. So the first one we're going to try is 7. And down here, negative 1. So if you want to use your calculator, just type it in exactly as you see it. 7 squared minus 5 times 7. We get 14. So the square root of 14 equals, well, 7 plus 7, I can do that in my head. 14. So that's an answer. Now, you don't just stop. You have to check both. Okay? So remember, you have to type it in exactly as you see it. And close it. And we get the square root of 6. Negative 1 plus 7 is the square root of 6. So guess what, guys? We have two answers, and that's okay. All right? Well, thank you for watching, guys. That's day 1 of chapter 11.4 notes. Day 2 will just be going over the middle column, and day 3 will be the last column. So we're splitting this up into 3 different days. Now, if you have any questions, come in for help. All right? Otherwise, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.